Hey, YouTube folks, I am interviewing today my good friend Mike Vardy of productivityist.com. So let me get a couple things going for the podcast and we will be rock and rolling here in just a moment. All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey folks, I'm your host Todd Bergen, and you are listening to the Divorce the Workforce podcast. I interview entrepreneurs and online hustlers about what they do, why they do what they do, and how they go about doing it. Learn about how they got started and why. Also hear about their successes as well as their failures, and learn from them as you chart your own course to freedom. Welcome to the program. And today I have a very special guest, a new friend to me that I met this year at World Domination Summit 2016 in Portland, Oregon, Mike Vardy of the productivityist.com. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. I'll tell you, I saw you speak at World Domination Summit and I was dazzled with your content. So why don't you tell the crowd what productivityist.com is and how you got started with it?
So Productivityist is a company that I created. It originally rose from the ashes of my own personal blog, and I'm a productivity strategist. So the term productivityist came from me. I think I just coined it on an old podcast episode I was doing with my podcasting partner at the time, Michael Schechter. And a bunch of bloggers heard me say it, and a couple of people wrote about it. And I said, well, I'm going to own the term then. Might as well own it. And so it's basically a portmanteau of productivity and strategist or enthusiast or specialist, whatever way you want to consider yourself. And what I do is I basically write about productivity, write about different ways to tackle your day, your weeks, your months, your years. And now I've got my own productivity methodology that I teach, some of which I brought to the stage at World Domination Summit. And the reason I got into it was because I was working at Costco for a number of years. I was trying to balance my work life with my home life, and I was doing some comedy at the time. And I realized that I had to kind of find some way to balance all of that and manage my time better. So I started to study productivity, and then that became my passion. I just dove right into it, and eventually I left Costco. And started this journey as my own running my own company initially as a solopreneur, and now at the point where I'm now training other coaches to teach my methods and stuff. So it's grown in leaps and bounds over the past few years, and now I get to work from home. I get to travel and do things all over North America. In fact, it'll be global coming up in March of 2017 when I travel to the Philippines to speak at a conference there. And it's just been a blast. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and they said, if 5 years ago, if you said you were going to be going to the Philippines to speak, I would have told them, yeah, whatever. Even back when I first started going to the World Domination Summit, that was not even on the radar. So it's been an awesome journey, and it's really only just beginning.
And is that how long you've been doing Productivityist? Is 5 years?
Yeah, Productivityist has been around. I've been doing productivity I've been studying productivity for the past decade. Productivityist has been around in its current form for about 6 years now.
And you've also got a podcast for your business as well, correct?
Yep. It's called the Productivityist Podcast. I've been podcasting for about 8 years with different podcasts, but my only podcast at this point is the company one, the Productivityist Podcast, where I interview productivity experts. And I also have a Patreon campaign for those who are who want extra content and stuff like that. But yeah, I've been doing podcasting for a while, and I love that because I used to work in college radio. So the fact that I can now take that and use that, have a platform for that. And again, when I was doing comedy, my goal was to get on stage more. Now I get to speak on stage, make a little bit more money than I would have as a comedian, to be honest. Right. And also help more people. So yeah, I've got the podcast, I've got some books, some products, and I do coaching as well.
So do you find that you're working more with new entrepreneurs or people that are already going, or is it a good mix?
I'd say it's a good mix. I mean, when it comes to coaching, my typical client is like a mid-sized business, like he's the CEO or someone who's running a business that they're trying to grow, or they're trying to just to get simplify things, to get a bit clearer and get more intentional with their work. Those are the people I tend to work with. It's a B2B, B2C mix, to be honest. I mean, and I never set out to say I'm only going to go after individuals or I'm only going to go after businesses. It's just kind of, with the work I've done online, people have sought me out and said, hey, will you coach me? Hey, will you coach me? And to the point where I'm now training others because I can only scale so far. It's interesting. I just talked not too long ago for an upcoming episode of my podcast with Michael Gerber of the E-Myth. And that was something that was really great for me to hear because I want to scale. I want to go from a company of 1 to a company of 1,000, so to speak. And maybe not 1,000, but you get the drift.
Sure.
And so that's where I find that my energy is going to lately is building a training program so I can say, hey, so-and-so, you want to teach this? Well, here's the tools you need. And I'm finding that's my kind of like my mandate right now. My mission is to get the approach, which I call the now year method, into the world so that more people can have a simple, flexible, and durable way to, make their personal productivity workflows happen.
Now, have you been coached yourself on productivity, or are you pretty much self-taught?
Initially, I dove in to all of the great works of like Covey and David Allen and, even Tony Robbins' stuff, from which, of course, he's taken from others as well. And so I was self-taught with that, but I'm always on the lookout to learn. Again, I think having the sense to look back at my comedy background, where I was just studying the different people who did comedy, I do the same thing with productivity. So I will learn about the different methods. And that's why I was a specialist initially. Like, I called myself a productivity specialist because what I would do is teach people or give people guidance as to what method might work for them or what tools. But I've taken all the best of the stuff that I've gotten, as well as, modified it and even added some new stuff to it to put my own approach together. So I'm still always learning. I think that, if I wasn't, then I wouldn't be very good at what I do. So, but yeah, I still, I've got peers that I look to and say, oh, how are you doing this? And I think it's important.
So when somebody contacts you for help, or generally when people have contacted you for help, what tends to be, like number one, number two problems that people are having? I mean, we could all assume that it's going to be time management or email management, social media management, whatever. But I'm sure there's a couple themes that you see with everyone who comes your way. Yeah.
Overwhelm is number one. I'm feeling like I've got too much going on. I don't know how to keep control over it. I can't get focused. And then they get into the more symptoms of like, oh, my email inbox is out of control, or I'm late for meetings all the time, or, I can't seem to get everything on my to-do list done. Like, so it's just a general sense of overwhelm. And when I deal with them initially, I that's why when I talked about the idea of theming time and theming days, which is what I really dove into at the WDS talk, is I said, listen, you have to kind of take a step back and, disconnect from all of the craziness and say, okay, well, how am I going to get focus in a way that is as simple as possible? So instead of me trying to grasp at straws, you're segmenting them into different piles. It's kind of like, opening up a box of a bag of M&Ms and, instead of trying like just willy-nilly eating them, you're saying, okay, I'm going to put the brown ones here, the orange ones here, you're segmenting them off. That's kind of what I do with people, no matter what their issues are. But generally it's overwhelm, and things like distraction, disruptions, all that stuff feeds into that overwhelming factor. And then we just take it from there. And whether we start with, how do we get through the day, or how do we map out something larger? That's the great thing, is I can say, okay, do you want to just get through today, or do you want to look more beyond that initially? And we dive in and we make things happen. And it's the nice thing about it is that I find that when you simplify things and you slow down and, take a step back and say, okay, well, what are the big things you really want to work on? Like, where are you feeling that you're falling down? Once we start to give those areas a bit more intentional focus, then people can pay more attention to them. Because my definition of productivity isn't like efficiency plus effectiveness or speed plus duration or whatever. It's intention plus attention. You have your intentions and you want to give them the attention they deserve so they can be fulfilled. And that to me is productivity. Then you just get faster at it or better at it. But initially it's intention plus attention.
Well, and I remember your presentation at World Domination Summit. I took fairly good notes, probably not good enough because you talked about a lot of stuff. But when you mentioned the M&Ms, you putting the brown into one pile and yellow into another, and what that's kind of goes to a quote that you had: framework fosters freedom. That really stuck out with me.
Yeah, and the problem is a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to have a framework. I want to have more freedom." But the problem is that when you don't have any kind of grid or framework or structure, then the likelihood of it collapsing is far greater. When I worked at Costco, that was one of the things that you see there is that the warehouses are all built the same, and the simplified way that they're constructed, like their floors are concrete, and the pallets are what they store stuff on, and everything is printed on these dot matrix printers and things like that. Like it's a simple way to do stuff, but the payoff is so huge because you go in there and you know what to expect, and you can get in and get out if you want and spend as little as you want. But as most people do, they go in to buy butter and milk and end up buying a TV or something crazy because they didn't expect to, and they spend $400 or whatever. But the problem is, even with creatives, is they'll say, "Oh, I just love the free flow component." But if you don't have that framework in place, then your brain is doing extra work. Your brain is saying, "Okay, what do I do now? How do I?" You're scattered. Whereas, again, with the idea of theming your time, and I love the idea of theme days, is to say, "Okay, it's Monday. What do I have to do today? Or what do I need to do today? Or what do I want to do today?" That just creates a whole bunch of other questions, where instead, if you say, "Okay, well, it's Monday. Well, what's Monday's theme?" "Oh, Monday's theme is administrative work." "Okay, well, what administrative work do I need to do?" You're just funneling it in. And I think that once you have that framework in place, and really, like, a calendar is a framework, a clock's a framework, all those things are frameworks. Once you embrace that and then decide to create a framework that works for you, no matter what job you work in, you can do that. Then you're going to have the ability to have the freedom to make better choices, to do better work, and so on.
Well, I'll tell you, I took some of your advice, and one of the other things that you had said was, and I live by lists. I mean, I live by lists, and you really hit it hard about how successful people tend to live by the calendar, and unsuccessful people often live by the list. I think that was you that said that. There were 4 or 5 and my notes are all jumbled, but I try to wean myself from the list, because the list is never ending. It's always going. There's always new, and there's no rhyme or reason to it.
No, I think that, and I know that a lot. I'm not so hard and fast about the idea that the calendar is you must work by your calendar. I think that the calendar is great as a guide. So, like, I have people that put every single task in their calendar, and they get really detailed about it. But the problem with that, and I've seen this with other clients, is that they look at their day as soon as they open up their calendar and they see 40 things on there, 20 things on there, and they already are overwhelmed. For me, I like the combination of saying, okay, I have my lists, or I have my list, and it's segmented by theme, right? Or it's segmented by the mode I'm in, which you're getting a bit deeper into the weeds when you start talking about mode-based work. But even if you just said, I have these, 7 themes, because 7 days a week, 7 themes. Let's say you do that. You've got really one long list, but it's segmented by 7 different ideas, right? And then what you do is your calendar says, hey, today's admin day. So now you know what list to look at. That, to me, is far more freeing than saying, okay, it's Monday, let me look at my list and see all the things that are on my list, because you're going to get the same feeling you'd get as if you put everything on your calendar. So I think it's important to know what role each of them play. And I will be the first to admit that I was more of a list person than a calendar person when I was doing David Allen's Getting Things Done methodology, because for David Allen's GTD, what you do is you put only the absolute appointments on your calendar. But the problem is that, again, you only see those, like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment today at 1 and I have a meeting at 3 and so on and so forth. But you have all this space in between, at which point you're supposed to look at your list and to make decisions based on the projects you're working on, et cetera. Well, even if you have, like, those days where you've got 3 or 4 meetings or 2 or 3 doctor's appointments or whatever, when you're out of that doctor's appointment, or when you finish, or you've got that half hour between meetings, instead of saying, okay, let me jump into email, or let me jump onto Facebook, or because I've only got 20 or 30 minutes, you say, okay, hold on a second, what day is it? Oh, it's Monday. Okay, Monday's admin day. Okay, what admin work can I do in this 30-minute window? So it does give you that freedom and flexibility without you feeling, like you said, like the list immediately creates overwhelm, or creates this paralysis by analysis situation.
Sure.
You don't have that. It's a far easier question to ask yourself, what day is it? Because you know the answer. Then what do I need to do now? because your brain will go, well, I need to work on the chapter for my book. But then the other part of your brain, the lizard brain, let's call it, says, yeah, but you know what? Email is so much easier because people tell you what to do on there, and you're going to get a dopamine hit every time you do something on email. Or let's go on Facebook because it's easier. So again, I think it's important to have both in your life, lists and calendars. But I think it's important to know what each role is, what the role of each of them is, so that way you can use them most effectively.
Sure. Well, and also, like you said, organizing your list so that the items in the list are themed. So you're maybe you're knocking 4 or 5 things out of the list at one time rather than taking them on one at a time. You're taking on 4 items in the list during a 2-hour window or something like that.
Right, because most people will work by the list by project. But the problem with working by project all the time, it's kind of like going grocery shopping with a meal plan and shopping by day of the week. You're going to end up visiting the meat department 5 to 7 times. You're going to end up visiting the produce department 5 to 7 times. That's not how anyone grocery shops unless they're, having some serious issues deciding what they're going to have.
Right.
Whereas you would normally go, okay, I'm going to buy all my produce, and you round it all up. You can buy all your meat. If you work by mode, and themes are essentially like the highest version of modes, then you could say, okay, well, what are all the things that are related to admin? Today is my planning day as we're recording this. So what are all my things related to planning day? In fact, before we recorded this conversation, I told you that an old friend of mine wants to get together today, and he said, "Well, I read that he's been reading my blog. I haven't seen him in a long time." And he said, "Well, I know today's your planning day, so I don't know. You probably got some freedom today." I'm like, "That's good on you, buddy. Like you read that, so sure. Yes, I can. I have that freedom to do that." Whereas if he had said, "Oh, today's your audio video day," which is Wednesday for me, he's probably going to say, "You know what? I know you can't do anything today because you're doing camera work or video or audio work." So, and also this kind of stuff allows you to deliberately delay tasks. So, for example, if you make, like for me, Wednesday is my audio and video day. Well, if I don't get all my audio and video work done that day, first off, theming allows me to be proactive, so I'm ahead of the curve. But if I can't get it all done that day, I don't go, well, I'm going to push it to tomorrow and the next tomorrow. I go, no, you know what? It's going on Wednesday. I guess I'm not getting to this till next Wednesday. So it creates this framework that allows you to make choices that are more deliberate than more by default, if that makes sense.
So I think it does. So let's say I make Mondays a day where all I'm going to do on Monday is write.
Sure.
And I get a wrench thrown in that whole Monday. And Tuesday's a different day. Tuesday's going to be podcasting. Mm-hmm. Wednesday's live video. Thursday's what? Okay, so you know what? So Mondays are writing.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, tomorrow I'm screwed. I don't get anything done tomorrow, which is Monday tomorrow. You would suggest to then just kind of and put it off till the next Monday, which it's scheduled for, instead of disrupting the rest of the week.
I think that's what I would suggest is that you look at everything, because again, at the end of the day, I journal, right? Like that's part of the process for me. So I'll look at it and say, look, so if that was my Monday, I'm like, damn it, the whole day was derailed because I spent my kid fell down the stairs and I had to go to emergency and I was in the hospital most of the day. Let's just say that's what it is. That's an extreme
It's funny
case.
that in my head, that's what I was thinking. My kid got hurt at school.
Right. Yeah. Something like that. You get derailed. And you can't call that a distraction either. You have to call that a disruption. A lot of people go, I was distracted by my kid. No, your kids, distractions to me are things that you can stop from happening. Like, so if our phone was to ring right now, that would be a distraction because we had
mine
the
just
ability.
Did.
Yeah, so going forward, you can mitigate that by making sure it's on airplane mode, let's say. But if it's a disruption, like if somebody ran into the room or your fire alarm went off, that's a disruption. The only way, you can't really control that. So, but back to your point. So if that happens, then what I would do is I do a journal entry. Like, oh, my day was derailed. But I know that this writing needs to get done. So I am going to do this. This is going to be the exception to the rule. Like, let's say Tuesday. So Tuesday for me, if Tuesday is like you said, it's your live video day. You say, okay, you know what? I didn't get this essential piece of writing done that I wanted to get done yesterday. So that's going to have to be the exception to the rule for Tuesday. And I'm going to make it one of my 3 absolutes. But everything else that isn't essential, I would move to the next Monday. I would say, oh, well, didn't get that done. And again, once you start working by theme regularly, first off, the tasks that are aligned with those themes will almost by osmosis move to that. Like you'll get an email that says, hey, Todd, I'm hoping that you put together a plan, and you'll see the word plan. You're like, oh, plan Sunday. You'll slide it to Sunday, right? Because that's when unless it's urgent. But you know what I mean? You'll start to see these things that'll navigate their way to the appropriate day. And once you start doing themed days regularly, and you can't just do it for like a week and then say it's going to stick. Like, it's got to be like the old 30-day, okay, I'm doing it for a month, and now all of a sudden you start to see a pattern there. You'll be able to get a bit more proactive with it, because instead of you pushing all of that stuff to Tuesday, which, by the way, if you do, then guess what you're going to be behind in the next day?
Yep.
Your live video. And so when you start doing that, then you're back to like what's urgent. And the problem with that is you then are adopting a time-based mindset. And a time-based mindset forces you to work on what's urgent. It removes decision from the process. But a task-based mindset allows you to focus on what's important. So the difference isn't so much the important urgent stuff. It's the forces versus allows. You have this ability to make choices when you work by task. And you can't always work by task. Let's be clear about that. But when you're working by time all the time, then you're feeling forced. So I would, in your case, say, okay, what's the main writing task, or maybe there's 2 or 3 that I need to work on. All right, well, I'm gonna work on those. Those are gonna have to happen tomorrow. But all the other ones, they're just moving to the next Monday. And then the same thing could happen if you were working on those writing tasks on Tuesday, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do those 3 writing tasks, and I want to do all this or this live video work. I'm only going to be able to get one of them done until it self-corrects. But I would not say I'm moving everything from writing to the Tuesday, because then you're derailing your progress on more than one front. You're derailing it both on the writing and on the video, and then ultimately probably on the audio, and then ultimately on everything else, because you're just sliding things day by day by day.
Got it. Now, you mentioned the 3 absolutes, and I think you spoke about that at WDS. I can't recall.
Yep.
I did see it on your blog when I was looking over your articles. What are the 3 absolutes, and how do you come to choose those?
So my 3 absolutes are the things I absolutely need or want to do that day. They're more often needs than wants, to be honest, because of the fact that as your life gets busier, you will have things that absolutely need to get done on a certain day. So I basically signify 3 things on my task list, and I use a tool called Todoist for my digital task management. But if you're using paper, you could signify them in any other way you want. And what they're the 3 things that I absolutely must do that day, and I normally will knock out one of them first thing. So when I wake up in the morning, I go downstairs I do my morning routine, come down to my office. And then what I'll do is I look at my laptop, and on top of my laptop, I have a piece of paper. Sometimes it's a Post-it, doesn't really matter, but it says here are your 3 absolutes for the day. And so I see them before I even jump into email or whatever. And then my goal is to do at least one of those before I move into it. So and the reason I say 3 is because it's easy for your brain to remember 3. There's studies upon studies that say we're much better at remembering things in groups of 3s or in 3 individual, segments. And then after that, and sometimes those 3 absolutes, like I said, may not be for the theme of that day. Like example that you gave. Okay, the writing I was supposed to do on Monday, I need to do now. Well, okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I've got 2 other absolutes that might be related to that theme. And normally they are. It just gives you some purpose, and it allows you to say, okay, these are the 3 things that I've designated from the day before, or even the multiple days before, that need to be done. And the great thing about using a digital tool like Todoist, as an example, is I've created a filter in Todoist that shows me, when I open up Todoist, what are my 3 absolutes for the next 15 days. So I could see, okay, here are today's absolutes, and here's tomorrow's, and here's the next. And if I'm looking at it and I don't see anything, like let's say I only have 2 absolutes for tomorrow. If I get my 3 absolutes done for the day, and then I look at tomorrow's stuff, I can signify one of those as an absolute. Or maybe something I didn't get done today, I can signify for tomorrow's absolute. So I think it's important to have those, because once you have them, then it's kind of a good way to get your agenda kicked off for the day. And the reason I do them before anything else is because if I get sucked into the email vortex for an hour, which can happen, or somebody else's stuff, I can at least say, look, at least I did one of my things first. And I think that's important. Not enough people do that.
Yeah, I'm actually impressed that you sometimes schedule out your 3 absolutes, 10 or 15 days out. I would imagine a nightmare of disruption if I tried that.
Well, but the thing is, though, once you theme your days, then you can signify those absolutes based on the themes, right? So it's like, hey, I absolutely must do the show notes for this podcast episode because today is audio. Like, so your absolutes are often shaped by the day's theme. And then what happens is when you assess at the end of a day, you're like, okay, you know what? This thing didn't get done. It now is an absolute. You can, and you're looking, you're like, okay, well, here are the three absolutes for tomorrow or the next time the audio day rolls around. Okay, I'm going to make one of them not an absolute anymore. The key is to always have three of them. Like, you can't just say, and I've had clients say, well, can I just have one absolute? I'm like, no, have three, because once you get the one done, then you're going to have to make choices again. And that can slow you down. So pick three based on the theme of that day, or let's say, again, you've had some issues with days beforehand, like, be deliberate about that, because you can get three things done. If I only get my three absolutes done of all those things on my list for that day, that's happened, I can at least say that I was productive. I'm like, hey, I did the three things I set out to do, and then I did everybody else's junk. But if you get those three things done, then that's a win in my book. So that to me is why. I mean, and like I said, they're not. If I look at it 2 weeks down the road, it's not set in stone. You sometimes will have to move them, but by having that criteria, that framework of saying I must have three absolutes every single day, it creates that framework that your brain knows to rely on. Like, hey, these are the three things that I know I'm going to need and want to get done today.
Sure. Brilliant. I'm gonna have to work harder at it. I've actually tried to put a lot of what you said into play, and I've had some successes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I think it's always a battle.
Yep.
And I deal with, of course, I've got children, and my wife doesn't work, and I get pulled into a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't get pulled into in helping on a daily basis with this or that. But I think it's brilliant, and I'm going to work harder at it. Was looking over your blog, and I think that because of the time of year that we're in, I think this is very important for us to cover today. I think you had two articles. You had one where you were talking about finishing the year strong,
mm-hmm. and
things that you could do to do that. And then you had another one, which I think I just dug deep enough back and I saw it. It was at the beginning of this year. I think it was I don't remember how you exactly said it and framed it, but it was about getting the year on track in January and dealing with resolution. So, I'd kind of like to dive a little bit into ways to finish the year strong. And I don't have, I know that can be very subjective with, because of everyone has different problems and different things going on, but are there some generalized things that somebody could look at to finish out the year strong? Say an entrepreneur who's, got a lot on their plate, like we've been talking about, disruptions and things to do. What can they do to finish the year strong and be productive at it?
Well, I think one of the things that as we're coming up to the end of the calendar year, I think it's important to kind of say, first off, one of the things I always suggest people do is, like, if they recognize that that they've got some stuff that they haven't cleared out, just take a deep breath, take a day and stop and just say, I'm going to take what I call a gap day. And I use gap days all the time around vacation or travel. In fact, when I was at World Domination Summit, I had a gap day before I left and a gap day after I left, or after I returned rather. And I make sure that my autoresponders are all that. And in the article, I actually say, I'm going to have limited availability for the next number of days as I ring in the new year, go on vacation, whatever. And then it will take me up to 3 business days from the date I get back to work. So you set these boundaries. And I think that's really important. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of look at, and the reason I love theming in general, because I also theme my months, is I can say, okay, this month I want to make sure that I want to work on my Now Year course, let's say, right? So I want to make sure I finish those things. So I identify that and say, okay, what are the things I need to do, want to do, all that stuff. I think that what you want to do is you need to, like I said, take that step back. Journaling is such a key part of what I do, because I see it and I say, it allows me to correct course really easily. And so I think that you want to be kind to yourself, be gentle, but also say, okay, what are the things that I absolutely, and again, maybe, you don't call them absolutes at this point, but what are the things that I want to knock out before January 1st rolls around? And the other thing that I'm not a big fan of New Year's as a rule anyway, in terms of January 1st being the start of the year. And the reason is, we're coming up to Thanksgiving in the United States. We've already done it in Canada. We're proactive. But we're coming up to Thanksgiving, which is really the beginning of the end of the year for Americans, because right after Thanksgiving, you're going into the holiday shopping season, and then Christmas. Like, it's just a go, fast now approach. And then once December 26th rolls around, it's like, hey, guess what? Now it's time to come up with some amazing resolutions for the end of the year. What are you going to do? And you're like, oh, wow, I guess I'll take up yoga or whatever. And then you go to the gym and, of course, or the yoga studio in January, it's jam packed. And, of course, you're like, well, I'll go tomorrow. And then tomorrow never comes. So when it comes to, I like to give January kind of as a month of reflection. I don't like it to be like I'm going to start the new habit. If anything, it's I'm going to figure out what I really want to do. So instead of like just jumping in with both feet and saying, I'm going to learn how to play guitar, or I'm going to get in better shape, just say, I'm going to come up with plans. I'm going to make January like my planning month. If this is when you start your year. I start my year in September because like you, I have kids, and my kids start school in September and they end in June. So really for me, the year for me is mirrored with my kids, because then the last 2 months of the year, we kind of just do fundamentally whatever projects or small things that I can work on without fear of being interrupted by the kids. So I think it's important to just take a day, and you can afford to take a day. Like Thanksgiving, I mean, the one thing you guys have about with Thanksgiving down there is that it's on a Thursday, right? Well, what's the day after? The day after is a Friday. Are you going to work on the Friday? Probably not. In fact, most Americans take it as a long weekend, Thursday through Sunday, right?
Right.
So take that Friday and make that the day where you're like, okay, let's take stock. I don't have to work this day, so no one's going to give me a hard time. Everyone's in turkey coma or whatever, and I'm going to plan out what I want to do over the next 6 weeks so that I can finish the year strong. And the way I do it is I kind of like write down all the tasks that I want to do, and then I put an N next to it, which is something I need to do. It's O if it's something I ought to do, and it's W if it's something I want to do. And if it's an O, and this is how the now year method works, then if it's an O, it has 0 value, because you haven't decided whether it's a need or a want. So once you've written all these things out, decide if it's an ought should become a need or a want. If it becomes a need, then that's great. If it becomes a want, that's great. If you cannot reasonably say it needs to be either, cross it off. You're not going to do it. And give your focuses to your needs and your wants, and relate them to projects. Like, hey, this is a book project I want to work on, or this is like you're working on your podcast. Hey, these are all the things I like. Put a guest list together for the next year's podcast. That's something. It's not something you necessarily need to do, but it's something you want to do. And so give those your focus between now and the next, and then put together a plan and just take that day to do that. And I think that's something that not enough people do. Not enough people take a step back. Not enough people claim their time and set boundaries around it, so that way they can actually make those things happen. And then January, don't make it like I'm going to start training for a marathon or whatever. Like, make it your month to like plan and prepare. And then when February rolls around, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go do a workout program, February 1st, and I actually love February 2nd, because February 2nd is Groundhog Day. And I love that movie. And I try to say February 2nd is kind of the you don't want last year to look the same as this year. Right. So maybe make it February 1st or February 2nd. We're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym now. And I guarantee you go to the gym starting February 1st or 2nd, the gym will be less full than it would be on January 2nd. Yeah. So just take that month and recharge, rejuvenate, replenish yourself. And then you've got the next 11 months. Because let's face it, most of us don't take the full 12 to do everything we want to do anyway. We take we tend to work in 12-week blocks. So that's what I would suggest. And it's worked for me. I've tweaked it. I used to start my year in February. Now February is my mid-year point because of the way I start my year. So just because the calendar says that January 1st is New Year's Day doesn't mean it has to be your New Year's Day. You could start the year you want anytime you want. It's just a matter of how you start it that matters.
I agree completely with that. I tend to start when it comes to exercise, I tend to start my year in July, around July 4th.
So you can get the summer bod, right?
Well,
like the beach
yeah. I go to San Francisco every year for an event around mid-July, and I think the Golden Gate Bridge is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. The whole area around there, I'm totally amazed by it. It's dazzling. It's cool. And so I start my exercise regimen by running from one side to the other and back. Mm-hmm. Usually it's walking, because it's full of tourists who are trying to ride their bike while they're filming it with their phone. So they've got one hand on a grip. They've got the other hand holding the phone up in the air that they're trying to watch where they're going through their phone. And
Everyone
so,
should just get GoPros for that. Just get a
yeah,
GoPro.
well, they shouldn't rent bikes on the bridge, quite honestly. It
To be
really,
true, yeah, fair, true.
it makes it very difficult to cross safely if you want to run. It's easier to walk because you've got some time. But so I use that as a start. It kind of is a, I do it by myself. I have done it one time with my son, who is turning 8 next week. So he's done it now. He did it when he was 5, I think, and did the whole thing without complaining. He was so eager to do it. But it's just where I clear my mind for an hour, do something really cool, and think about where I'm going. And so that's when I like to start. But I like that you suggest not to do it January 1st, because I think that people get so consumed with what's the resolution, and, everyone's setting themselves up to fail. I mean, by 3 or 4 weeks in, it's over.
Yeah, and you don't have the energy to do it either. I mean, you got to think about it this way: is that, again, that 6-week period from the third week in November to the end of the year, you are dealing with things that are like a holiday shopping season, eating a ridiculous amount of food that you wouldn't normally eat in that span of time, family stuff, like all that stuff. It's compounding, and then like I said, January 1st rolls around, and you're like, okay, time to do something brand new and awesome, and I don't care how your energy levels are. It's like, no. Take that month to recharge. And that means, and the best part is that it's a good time of year to do that, because you want to start the year strong, but especially in an office environment and stuff, I know a lot of people are into like, okay, we're gonna really kick things off great, but that allows you to focus on that rather than, okay, I'm trying to kick this off great and do book club night every week, and like it just creates a lot more stress. Whereas you say, you know what, I'm going to methodically and deliberately plan what I'm going to do between now and, frankly, the end of next January, because you could do that at that point. Then you could say, all right, well, start February 1st. That's when I kick it off. So that's when I'm going to start training for that marathon, or I'm going to start learning a meditation practice or whatever. It really does make a difference. That 30 days of just mapping it out makes a huge difference, as opposed to just diving in when everybody else does, because the obstacles aren't just going to be external, but they're going to be internal as well.
Sure. Well, and when you do it like you're saying, like, I think picking Groundhog Day is an excellent idea, quite honestly. You're doing it for yourself. You're not just doing it because the herd is doing it.
Yeah. So what's the Mark Twain quote? And I'm gonna botch it right now, but it's like, when you find your mind is on the same side as everyone else's, it's time to pause and reflect. Paraphrasing it, but that's kind of what you got to do. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason that there's a reason that people don't go rushing out to buy on Black Friday like everybody else does, and they stay at home and shop on Cyber Monday. Like my wife, she's like, "Why do you do all your shopping online?" I'm like, because then I don't have to go anywhere. Like I could do it, and I actually build my shopping list. I've actually bought gifts for Christmas and birthdays well in advance, because, again, having that list, having the wherewithal, and I mean, I have a family day, right? Like Saturday is my family day.
Sure.
I will do things like, oh, Grace mentioned that she wants this really cool thing. Like we went and she wants this makeup that she really likes by a girl named Zoella. That's my daughter, Grace. And I'm like, you know what? I've made a note of it. And that means that I don't have to go, I wonder what Grace wants for Christmas or whatever. I mean, it shows I'm paying attention. And if you pay attention throughout the year to your intentions, then you're going to get better quality results than if you just wait until the last minute. There's nothing worse than trying to cram things in at the last minute, or not have your, or following somebody else's intentions like we were talking about, because you're not going to pay as much attention to them, and you're not going to get the same results or the results that you want.
I agree completely. So somebody that, first time, or a listener whose first time has been exposed to you, is wanting to get started being productive, I think they can glean from our conversation where to start. But I mean, do you have like top 3 things you would do right away to just kind of get the ball moving and get things to where you can even be more productive?
Yeah, first thing I would do, I'll give you one, like, kind of the themed idea. I think is something I would look at your week, work backwards from your certainties, and theme your days of the week. Now, if you don't feel you can do that, because you have a 9-to-5 job and it's incredibly dynamic, you can just theme the times outside of your job. So if you're working like 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or 8 to 5 or whatever, you could say, okay, well, before work, this is my theme, and after work, this is my theme. So instead of just coming home and watching Netflix or being exhausted, you have some purpose. So I think that theming your weeks, your days of the week is important. Another thing that I've been doing lately, and this is something with email that I'm working with a lot of clients, is stop putting your emails into folders that are client-based or project-based, and because it can create a lot of friction for you finding this stuff. Archiving email is one thing you can do, and it doesn't get deleted. Remember, if you archive an email, it's not gone. But if you're having trouble getting your inbox cleared in email, what I suggest you do is, if you answer email 7 days a week, then create folders in Gmail or Outlook, 01 Monday, 02 Tuesday, whatever, put numbers in front of them because they like to sort them alphabetically. And then when you get an email in your inbox, instead of going, I'm just going to leave it in my inbox, make a decision. Am I going to reply to this now? If so, then reply to it and then archive it. If you are going to deal with it later, then decide what day you're going to deal with it and drag it to that folder. So if you get an email on a Monday and you're like, I'm not going to deal with this till Wednesday, don't leave it in your inbox, drag it to Wednesday. And then what happens is once you get through your inbox, the next step isn't, okay, well, what do I do now? The next step is, again, what day is it? Oh, it's Wednesday. Let me look at the Wednesday folder, and you see all the emails you've put in there to deal with on a Wednesday. So instead of you scanning your inbox, looking at the thousands or hundreds or however many messages you have in there, you could say, all right, well, let me look at these are the emails I'm going to deal with today. It's really simple. It's really effective. And you can honestly get through. I mean, I had clients that I've been working with that had one guy, he emailed me, and he had his personal and professional email, 6,000 messages. And in an hour, he had his inboxes cleared and in the right folders. So that would be the two things. Those are just two things. One is more, larger. It's a larger thing, is to theme your days and then start to align your tasks that way. But if you're struggling with email, I found that there's nothing more effective than making that inbox a temporary storage area, a temporary landing zone, if anything. And then each of those other folders, the Monday through Sunday folder, or maybe Monday through Friday, if you're not going to answer email on weekends, those, again, it kind of lines up nicely with the themed idea and gets you out of this inbox scanning that a lot of us do from time to time, or worse, getting an email and then saying, I'm not going to deal with this right now, and then marking it as unread, which is a total lie. You've read it. You just decide you just aren't going to do anything with it.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I can learn by that as well. Fortunately, my inbox doesn't get the hundreds, but I always tend to have 5 or 7 that are always with me. So yeah, words of wisdom. Excellent. Well, listen, Mike, why don't you tell them where they can find you on the internet, where you like to interact as far as social media goes. So, if they've decided that they are going to check out what you're doing and dig more deep, they can do that.
Sure. So, website is productivityist.com. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, so I don't have to spell it. You can find me on Twitter at Mike Vardy. And also, if you're interested in, you just want to email me and ask me more questions about this, just email me at askmike@productivityist.com. And then finally, a lot of this stuff is covered in my most recent release, which is the Productivityist Playbook. And if you go to productivityist.com/playbook, you can learn more about it there.
Awesome, Mike. Listen, thank you so much. I feel like, I could talk for hours on this, but neither one of us can do that. But I really greatly appreciate you being on the show. I think it's a lot of good information here for people trying to sort things out. And I think what you're doing is awesome. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to spend with me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Listen, folks, you can check out Divorce the Workforce at divorcetheworkforce.com. Please like, rate, and review the broadcast and subscribe as well. I'm trying to hit 2 shows a week at this point. So a lot of good stuff coming up. And thank you for listening. As always, stay productive, my friends.